Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Legal Bites. Happy to let you know that our first episode that broadcast over a month ago ended up number 8 in Canada for food and beverage. So we're very proud of that. And as a result of that, we're now going bi-monthly. So we'll be here with you twice a month. I'm very happy to introduce my guests for today. We have some very esteemed colleagues from the industry. Our first guest is Tony Elenis. Tony is the president and CEO of the Ontario Restaurant, Hotel and Motel Association, also known as ORMA, and has been in the industry over 35 years. I've worked with Tony and had the pleasure of working with him and his organization over the years. And prior to his arrival at ORMA, Tony managed several high-achieving hotels for over 27 years. Tony, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be on your show, Adam.
Thank you, Tony. We also have Mr. Brandon Farmer, who's sitting here to my right. Brandon is the president of Honeycomb Hospitality that operates several amazing event spaces and restaurants here in Toronto. Barrow, Petty Cash, and Dasha just being a few of them. Brandon's been in the industry for quite a long time. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And of course, backed by popular demand, because he demanded it, we have Scott Fraser, my new co-host. Welcome, Scott. Glad to have you back.
Thank you.
So let's jump right in, gentlemen. Food and beverage. Brandon, you've been in the industry now for a while. You started off in the coffee industry, correct?
Yes.
What made you decide to go into the restaurant industry?
I think for me, it was just a passion of serving guests, hosting people. Something that's always been a passion for me. And then ultimately building teams. I love working with people, and those three things combined, I just found a true passion through starting as a job and working into an ownership role.
That's great. How many employees does Honeycomb have now?
We are well north of 300 employees now.
That's incredible. Good for you. Congratulations. Brandon, we have a lot of young people watching the show who are interested in either getting into the industry or already in the industry. Maybe they're servers, or maybe they're assistant managers, or they're in the kitchen. What advice would you give a young person who's looking to get his or her experience in upper management or ownership? Like, what are the lessons you learned along the way in the restaurant industry?
So just to take it to that next level, to level up. Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and this is what I always tell team members that identify as people that want to grow, especially in our company, is challenge your leader. Ask for a clear pathway to success. So we have a leadership program, and it's basically like, here's a very clear channel of like, you're a server and I want to get to assistant supervisor or a shift leader or a manager. Here's a pathway to success. Here's what you have to do to achieve that, and these are the skills that you have to develop and improve that you're good at this, and put yourself forward to potentially be eligible for that, the future role or opportunity that will pop up in the company.
So stand out, basically.
Stand out. Don't be shy. Don't be scared. I always tell my leaders this: if someone's not coming for your job, you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
Right. So like if you're a manager and someone's not trying to take you out, you're never going to grow. So if you want to become a GM, there better be somebody coming at you. So it's your job to develop that person to come at you. So never be scared to be replaced. Even myself, the CEO of Honeycomb, I want someone to eventually come and take me out. That's my goal. And I have people that challenge me every day. And I wouldn't be good at what I did unless I had that kind of that A-type or alpha circle constantly coming at you.
That's so true, and it applies across many fields. I know that when I started, I was a junior at a fairly large law firm, and every Friday, all the juniors, the other lawyers, couldn't wait to get out and get home. But what I would do is on Friday afternoon around 1 or 2 o'clock, I would go to all the senior partners' offices and ask them if they had anything that needed to be done over the weekend that I could do. Yeah. So everybody would look at me like the partners loved it, but the other associates would think I'm an idiot. Like, why is he doing this? What if he want to work? Or just ask whatever. But within 6 months of doing that, every time there was a trip to Vegas or California or England or Greece to meet a client, guess who the partners would take with them? This junior, because they knew I was a workhorse. I just wanted more and more and more. And eventually they only trusted me with their work, right? And it puts you right on the track for partnership. And so you're saying it's basically the exact same thing in food and beverage.
Yeah, like if you think about it, who do I want to put my energy into? Like the guy that's hungry, that's fighting every day, that's going to go the extra mile, or the person that's just entitled because they've been there for the X amount of time. So yeah, 100%. Like that, those are the people that I love. The people that are hungry, that come here,
They want to take it.
They ask me for advice, and we open that door. Like we have an open door policy. So to ask me to go for coffee, even if you're starting your own business, it's not related to my industry. We're big on that because I always think hospitality is two things. There are people that are trying to build a career, and there's also people it's a stepping stone to starting a career. Yeah, serving jobs, an amazing job to make tips and pay their way through school and network, gets people skills and yeah. So we support both those. As long as you come and represent our company properly and work hard, we'll actually help you start your own business.
That's amazing, and it's a great philosophy. We follow each other on Instagram, so I've seen what you guys do in terms of charity. And what was it, the turkey drive last time? What were you giving out?
We do the King West Cares turkey drive. So every year we do a partnership with all the different homeless shelters around the city. We donate 300 turkeys to different shelters. We also do a pickup program, so people that are in need, low-income housing can also register and come pick one up. Then this year we actually did one above and beyond. We went to the what was it called? What house is it called? Jesus Christ. On College Street, the Covenant House. So,
very nice,
so we want to do something. We wanted to elevate it. We did it 3 years in a row, and we always dropped it off. But we wanted to bring our team in, and we actually went and cooked for I think it was 120 people a few days before Christmas. So we brought the turkeys, we brought the food, and we provided it.
Good for you, buddy. Congratulations. I think giving back to the community is so important. You never get enough. The reason I joined that first firm that I was telling you about, I wanted to give back to I was born in Toronto and raised in Toronto, and I grew up in East York, very close to the Danforth. And I thought, one of the things I wanted to do as a lawyer was to give back to the community. So, basically pro bono, which for a lot of law firms, especially in the 90s, they weren't doing a lot of it. So when I sat down for my interview, they said to me, well, what are your thoughts? What are you looking for? And I said, one of the things I want to do is I want to open up a little office on Danforth and just offer pro bono services to people who can't normally afford a lawyer, but who are in trouble and need help. Right. And the partner said, we have two questions. How much is it going to cost? And can we help? And the moment I heard that, I knew this is where I needed to be, right? And we opened up our office, and I remember my first client, it was an elderly gentleman and his wife, and they had run into some problems with one of their children who had developed a bit of a habit, and the bank was coming after them and was trying to foreclose on their house, and it was just a nightmare. But we ended up working it out with the bank. They kept their house. The son got the help that he needed, and they came in to pay me. And of course, I wasn't going to take any money, but they brought a basket of vegetables, homegrown tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers. And I remember saying to my wife, I go, this is the best payment I've ever received in my life.
So you were trying to tell me I could have paid you all these years with vegetables? Vegetables.
Little did you know that you could have paid me with vegetables.
I thought I had to.
No, those are great stories. Those bring a tear to my eye, and I love things like that. So congratulations, Brandon, to you and to Honeycomb Hospitality. Let's move on to Tony. Tony, you've been in the industry now, what would we say, 35 years? Would that be fair?
Hotel industry, and 15 years with the Ontario Restaurant Hotel Motel Association. So that makes me 18.
Math seems right to me.
Yeah, that's how I do my calculations. Question. So you went from private sort of practice, if you want to call that, running hotels and restaurants, that sort of thing, and you went basically in-house now to Orma. So that's kind of like going from the frying pan into the fire in many ways, isn't it?
I love the hotel industry. I love hospitality industry, and I stayed with them for so many years only because of the development that offers you, development working with people, having fun, and building teams and managing. This industry is second to none as far as developing individuals, and something, of course, that we need to do a better job as an industry is to make sure the career path opportunities resonate with grade 6, grade 7, grade 8, and we have initiatives going on that But when they offered me to lead this organization, I turned it down a couple of times because I came from a food and beverage background, guest service, managing teams, as I was saying, and I thought government affairs were very dry. I wanted to continue having fun. And finally, I made the decision to move over because it was the industry I fell in love with, and it was a seamless transition. I can tell you now that government relations is in my blood as much as food and wine. And I drink a lot of wine because I've seen so much unfairness once I started opening up and seeing, and with all levels of government, irrelevant what political party, what political affiliation they're in, and really drives you crazy sometimes. But it's a great industry to be in any capacity.
Yeah. You know, Tony, you've been around now for a long time. And as I said, I've had the pleasure of working with Orma and with you for quite a while. And we've achieved some pretty amazing things. If you were to choose one item to say, you know, this was one achievement that I really value and that I'm extremely proud of, what would it be?
As we look back, I would say the tipping pool regulation.
I remember that.
Ontario.
Remember that. Yeah.
And the tipping pool is supporting many in the industry today to stay open because of the higher labor cost and the tip earners issues that the industry is facing. So I would say ensuring that the government initiated that tipping pool legislation.
Tony, I remember that. And if you recall correctly, we booked out a hotel in downtown Toronto and invited licensees to come in and hear. I think we had someone from the Minister of Finance come in. We had a tax lawyer, a consultant, and you and I were on the committee. Do you remember that?
Absolutely, I do.
And I remember when we booked the room, it was a 400 or 500 person room, and everybody was concerned about the expense. They're going, we're not going to get enough people. Restaurant people don't come out to these events, you know. And I said, no, let's just believe and let's just do it. So we booked a 440 person room. And by the time the conference started, it was standing room only all the way out to the hallways, just to show you how invested. And people had flown in from Vancouver, from Edmonton, from Calgary, because they wanted to understand how this works, because they had stores in Ontario and it was important to do it. And that was a great achievement. You're absolutely right. That was something I'm extremely proud of as well. One of the things that I look at, I think some of the biggest achievements that have come in the industry have come because we've continued to fight for them, despite the fact that we were never paid for it. I was retained one time to consult in a matter in a different province. And if you recall, Tony, Scott, I'm sure you remember this. Brandon, you haven't been around as long as Scott and I. That's why you don't have the wrinkles and the gray hair. But in the old days, if you were charged with having an intoxicated person or an underage person or a fight in your establishment, it was always a suspension immediately, no matter what.
There was no ifs, ands, or buts.
Yeah, no offense. You remember this, Tony, right?
The first one was a weekend.
Yeah, it was progressive. It was the penalties were progressive. So
they were shutting places down.
So people were going bankrupt because they were shut down for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's
right?
how people started having separate corporations on different floors in your building.
Yeah,
so if you got overcrowded on the main, you didn't get
Who would come up with an idea like that? It was a genius idea. Anyway,
it was punitive.
Yeah,
they weren't out helping us. They were looking at ways to punish you.
Yeah, Tony, do you remember those days?
You know, the government uses the word modernization, and whether we like it or not, modernization is moving along. But why does it take so long? Let me give you a couple examples. Back in my hotel days, I managed an entertainment bar with music in a hotel, and in those days, as a customer, you're not able to walk around with a drink in your hand. You could not move from one table to another. And now we have beverage rooms with the concept of really having to move around because it's fun, it's entertainment. You can dance around with the drinks. It's allowed. It only took a few years ago,
and it's all about
where we are actually allowed. We're allowed to feature chicken wings and a bottle of Corona on the table in a package.
Happy
Why
hour.
did it take so long? And
Yeah.
why did it take a pandemic to expand patios and allow beverage alcohol to be taken out with food? So
Yeah,
it's
you know,
really
strange things happen, Tony. And I remember, as I was saying, you know, back to the suspension days, where the only option was a suspension or a warning, and it meant that several places were literally going bankrupt because they were shut down for 10 days or 14 days for a suspension. Right. I was involved in a consultation in Edmonton in something that happened, and after meeting and, you know, discussing everything, the alcohol and the equivalent of the Alcohol and Gaming Commission out there, I think it's called the Alberta Gaming, the AGLC or something. They were talking with everybody, and they go, okay, 2,500. And I looked at them and I go, 2,500 what, days? Like, you want to give our guy a 2,500 day suspension? They go, no, $2,500 and we're done. I go, so hold on a second. First, yes, we'll take it
all day long.
Yeah.
All day
But
long.
secondly, you're telling me that there's a fine system here, and they go, yeah. So, and I feel like I've said this story before, but you know, it bears repeating. I asked them for copies of their legislation. I took it. I flew back to Toronto, and I went straight to the Alcohol and Gaming Commission and laid it on the desk of the legal counsel there. And I go, here it is, because we have been pushing for years for fines, monetary penalties, and they kept telling us, well, there's no system in place. You know, how do we do that? How do you gauge the severity of the infraction in terms of days? I'm going, you do it the exact same way you do it with money. The more serious it is, the more money you pay in a fine. But a fine doesn't put you out of business, right? It doesn't lose your customer.
It's also, you're penalizing the team members, you're penalizing everybody. There's a lot of people that rely on that job. Not just the owner that's getting penalized,
right? All
the employees. It screws everybody over. So
it
should be just directed at.
And that's what we do.
There have been many successes in working with the AGCO over the years.
100%. Yeah, especially most recently. But let's bring something up now that has really caught my attention. It's called the new tax compliance verification requirement for liquor licensees. It comes into effect on July 1st, Tony, in case you didn't know. And this is something extremely unique and very new to Ontario. So basically, if you have a license or you're applying for a license in Ontario after July 1st of this year, or if you're renewing an existing license, you have to get your tax compliance verification requirements in order. Now, the government is telling us you don't need a clearance certificate, but the reality is, I think you do, because effective, and I'm just reading from the legislation here, effective July 1st, new applicants and existing licensees applying for or renewing an AGCO liquor license must complete the tax compliance verification process and obtain their tax compliance verification number through the Ministry of Finance's tax verification portal. Now, if that sounds like a lot, believe me, it is. And I'll tell you why. So basically, so they're saying you don't need to get a clearance certificate, you just have to provide the number. But in addition to providing the number, you have to give an attestation that you don't owe money, right? And so what that tells me is, if you're let's imagine now you got a tax assessment and you appealed it. You said, hey, this tax assessment's not right. I don't owe $4 million. It should only be $1 million. And you assessed it. Then technically you would be considered not to be in compliance. So if you've got an appeal pending, what's going to happen if you can't get a clear verification number? Does that mean they don't renew your license? Does that mean you lose your restaurant or your hotel or your stadium license? Where are we going with this? And more importantly, was the industry consulted? Because we're dealing now, and Tony, you can attest to this. We're dealing, and Brandon, you can too.
I've never even heard of this.
Of course.
It's funny. This is crazy. Remember when we had
that was different. That was HST. And
only HST. That was not enough.
Yeah, that was PSD. You're right, Scott. You're aging yourself. That was like 20 years ago.
I am 21 years old.
Yeah.
You've never heard of me.
It is majestic.
It is genetics. Thanks, Dad.
Anyways, so my point is, here we have this new legislation. Brandon, were you consulted about this? Did you know about this?
Absolutely fucking insane.
Yeah, well, part of our program is to provide
education.
education.
Rely on your emails.
Guidance, yeah.
So usually get emails like updates from the government.
They're stocked up in vegetables.
There's going to be a basket and shipped here tomorrow. No, that's
we have a very good proactive communication with the AGCO.
Yeah.
And certainly we're surprised by this requirement.
You were surprised as well, right?
We expected some changes and other announcements, but not this one. We have reached out to the AGCO. We have a meeting next week to find out, some of the riddles that you went over. We don't know, and I don't want to guess right now what the consequences. If it's positive, we want to support it. If it's more efficient, we want to support it. But if it's about taking pennies away from an industry that is really hurting in post-pandemic, that is not acceptable.
Exactly. And I think that's our concern, Tony. I think you hit the nail on the head. So let me give you an idea now for all our listeners who are out there and who operate licensed establishments. This is now what you have to do, okay? First, you have to create an account on the government website. There's a portal that you go into, and you have to type in your business name, your business number, the address of your business, and the contact info. Then, once you've created that account, you're going to get 2 emails, one with a passcode and one with a PIN, giving you instructions on how to navigate the portal. So once you have your password and your PIN emails, you have to go in, create now your portal, and then you have to upload your HST number, and then you have to upload a certificate from CRA. So you're going to ask me, how do you get a certificate from CRA?
Yeah.
How do you do it? Right? Good. There you go.
You don't have on strike.
Yeah. Well, thankfully the strike's over. So basically you have to log into your CRA portal, request the certificate, and if you don't owe tax, you'll get it right away.
What's the purpose of it? Is there a huge issue with
unpaid?
Unpaid tax? Like, I know a lot of people were struggling on payment plans and structure
With all these.
I think Tony can speak to that.
Yeah, just the procedures alone create something we don't like. Red tape, especially in an industry where people are just trying to keep the doors open at this point.
Yeah.
So I believe once we have a chat with the AGCO, it calls for a webinar of some type and a bit more emphasis on how it works, the mechanics behind it. There's a lot of unknowns right now.
Yeah, well, I've just given you, we've done it. So I've just given you how it works. And we're a law firm, right? So we understand the process. I truly feel that a lot of our clients are going to have a rough time navigating through it. So you mentioned earlier that you were going to contact the AGCO and speak to them. We've already done that. So one of the questions I asked to them is, I said, what type of a consultation process did you go through with the stakeholders? Now, Tony, how many members do you have?
We have 12,000 businesses. We represent hotels and restaurants. And yes, we have reached out to the AGCO. We're just waiting for a formal meeting to go over that.
Yeah. No, but I just wanted to say that basically you have 12,000 members, many of which have liquor licenses. So you would think that your organization is an organization that should have received some kind of a heads up to all of this, saying, hey, this is coming, you better get ready. So I reached out to the AGCO and I said, tell us about this process. How did it work? And here's what they told me. And they're very, it was great. It was a very timely response, and I have to thank them for it. And they said the registry posting was open for comment from June 18th to July 19th, 2021. So basically what they did. Yeah, no. Hold on.
Instead of the lockdown?
Yeah.
Like
it gets even better. Yeah. So basically this went up on a government website and it said, hey, you've got basically 31 days to review and comment. Now, let me take you back to June 18th, 2021. June 18th, 2021 is the anniversary of the first day we got out of stage 1 lockdown. So on June 18th, 2021, restaurants who had no staff, had no management, couldn't operate inside. They were opening up their patios for the first time in a year.
But
right?
They were supposed to take time and go check out a government web portal.
How could you possibly expect someone on that day or even that month to go through and read through the website? Now, I did. I have to tell you.
Like an email saying, hey,
nothing. Yeah. So you'd think
that's how you slide things through.
Well,
you slip it through like the news comes out on a Friday, so it gets buried in the weekend.
This reminds me of the resound and SOCON fees and changes.
You remember those?
Where they go through the Copyright of Canada, they have what they call a registrar, and they post it without anybody knowing it. And no one, even associations, do not go in it every day and check on those portals. It is totally abnormal for something like this to go through the pipes and be implemented without going through a heads-up approach.
Tony, you've got 12,000 members. We represent thousands of clients who have liquor licenses. The government knows that if they want to reach out to the industry, they can come to you, they can come to us, and we can disseminate that information instantly in real time, right? But we never get those calls, unfortunately. It's almost as if the industry receives no respect from the various levels of government, whether it's provincial or whether it's federal. And this causes me a concern, because we can't continue this way. We can't have a productive and profitable and successful industry if we don't have the respect that we deserve. And of course, this brings us to our next sort of...
Adam, if I can interrupt you, I must say,
yes, you can interrupt. Yeah.
I do have regular meetings with the AGCO, but this was not brought up. That's why I'm totally surprised with it.
Yeah, that's all right, Tony. Things happen. What's important, though, is that, we recognize what's going on. We advise and inform our industry. We teach them how to comply with it. But we also point out to the government, hey, this was a mistake. This is something that you should have rolled out in a very different way, and you should have told us about it, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
But isn't that what the government does when they know it's wrong and the wrong way to do it? They just try and bury it?
Yeah, I don't know if it was that nefarious.
Oh, I think it's that nefarious. I'll take the blame on that. It's that nefarious.
Scott,
My restaurants are all closed now. You can't take that away from me right now.
and that's a fair comment.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
a lot of people
trust,
have suffered.
very few people I trust, and the government's not one of them.
So let's go on to something else. Let's change gears here now. And Jay, I'm going to need you to tee up something in a second. But we recently had an announcement. I don't know if you gentlemen have heard about it. The federal government and the provincial government teamed up and are giving Volkswagen about $13 billion in subsidies to secure an EV battery plant in St. Thomas, which is great news. And $13 billion is nothing to scoff at. That's a lot of money. Jay, can you just tee up our video where they announced that recently?
It's all within government, and that is Ontario's Finance Minister, Minister Beth McCalvey.
Well, thank you, Minister McNaughton, and it takes a team, and I'm pleased to be here with Premier Ford with a spanking new haircut. You're looking great, Premier. Minister McNaughton, Minister Tabolo, Jack, Mayor Del Duca. It's great to be back in Vaughan. Ontario, like the rest of the world, continues to face uncertain economic times. Families and businesses and workers are feeling the financial pressures the current economy is putting on them each and every day. Now, while Ontario's economy has remained resilient, the economic road ahead continues to be uncertain. But our government's plan is the right plan to navigate these challenges, and it is already showing results. Ontario's population is growing. In fact, it's just moved past 5.26 million people in Ontario. Jobs are being created, and we continue to attract manufacturing investments like you haven't seen in decades. And you saw last week, Volkswagen coming into Canada, first time in Canada, huge boost to Ontario's economy. So in just 2 days, I will release Ontario's 2023 budget. Our plan is to build a strong future for Ontario today. It is a plan that will support families, will support workers, and support businesses today while laying a strong fiscal foundation for future generations, many of whom we just met, some of the young men and women who are going to build Ontario.
Okay. So you mentioned the Americans are tearing their own hair. Trying to figure out what's going on, how they lost that Volkswagen facility. I wonder if the answer to that, though, is that we gave them a lot of subsidies. We heard that from Volkswagen, that the EU regulators, that they were going to put a pin in their facility in Europe because they wanted to go to North America because there were going to be lots of subsidies. And the assumption was at the time that they were going to go to the U.S. with subsidies from the Americans. So have we simply just outbid the Americans in terms of, are we in a race to the bottom in terms of just handing companies money in exchange for these facilities?
That's a fantastic question, and I'll tell you, it's just such a global competitive market right now, and every dollar is going to be transparent. But what we don't want to do at this time, give our competitors the knowledge that they need for all the other companies that want to come here. But first of all, we're going to make it transparent, every dollar that's spent. But we're in a competitive market, and if we don't compete, those jobs, and you think of all the jobs, the reciprocal jobs, other than one jobs, you're talking tens of thousands of jobs, more revenue to the local municipal government, more revenues going up to the province, more revenues going to the federal government. And that's where you create growth. Once you put a factory in St. Thomas, and I got to give a shout out to Mayor Preston, Joe was absolutely incredible. I love what he said to Volkswagen, and he said to me, he goes, I believe in one word, and the word is yes. Let's get it, let's make it happen. And again, there's going to be thousands and thousands, matter of fact, tens of thousands of jobs, spin-off jobs, because you need new communities, new roads, new stores, new schools, new everything. So this is really, really exciting, and it's a tax base that is going to be there for decades to come. It's going to be careers that people are going to have to be able to go out there and buy one of these new homes. So it's really, I'm just so excited about it. It's fantastic.
But if you gave this Volkswagen, a huge car maker, not hurting for money generally, if you gave them billions of dollars in subsidies, presumably, if you're not going to tell us.
No, eventually I will, but
okay.
I just don't want to give our trade secrets to our competitors down south.
Okay, but I mean, we have groups in this province crying out for funding in all sorts of places. Like we had a press conference down at the park this morning about needing more education funding. We have people on ODSP who are barely scraping by, even with the 5% increase you've given them. There's need for that money to be spent on other things other than subsidies. Why would you give?
So great question. Yeah, fantastic question. Again, do you know where all that money is coming from? It's coming from the taxpayer, the people that are creating the jobs. It's coming from the businesses that are deciding to open up here, and the spin-off jobs that are coming. I'm a strong believer in not gouging companies, not gouging people. And you get more people employed, more companies opening up, more revenues go up to the Queen's Park coffers. It's simple economics 101. We take that money. We've increased funding to education. We've increased funding to healthcare by $14 billion since we've been in office since 2018. But that's where you get the money from, by these people that are working and the companies that are working. Because all of a sudden you cut off the well and there's no income coming in. That's when we got a big problem. The number one area where you can get income is through the economy, the market. Let these businesses thrive and prosper. And again, as I stand here today, there's 600,000 more people working today than there was 4.5 years ago. Just think of that income base coming in and going out, and as simple as going out for dinner or buying a refrigerator. That's what stirs the economy, not government taxing people. But those were two excellent questions. Thank you.
Good morning.
Thanks, Jay. I think that's enough. Great. So let's talk about
is Stellani's on this call?
Pardon me?
Is Stellani's on this call?
No. Brandon, what did you think of that announcement? Be honest.
It's too much to say. I don't know. I don't even want to get into that. I'll open up a big can of worms.
Okay.
Hold on. I feel like Scott's got this one.
Tony, what are your thoughts? Tony, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, I'm not against projects like this. If I had a restaurant in London, Ontario, or a hotel,
right,
I would be jubilant right now.
Yeah.
Because it supports traffic. I mean, I manage hotels, as has been stated at the intro. And I can tell you the number of trades that come in and out for a manufacturing plant are enormous. That supports local community, local restaurants. Also, the wealth for those community members that go and visit restaurants. So I'm not against that, but But there is no doubt the size of the food service sector. It's the fourth largest private sector in Canada, in Ontario, a 4% GDP. It deserves recognition and investment to further support and return the investment back to the province and to the country.
Let's tee up on that. I think you make a great point. So we heard the word transparent in the Premier's comment several times. But the reality is, and that was from CPEC back in April of, I believe, April 22nd. To date, we still don't know what the numbers are. Anybody who's telling you what the numbers are, is it 13 billion? Is it 10 billion? They're just guessing. And so if anything, the process has been less than transparent. However, besides the fact that they're not being transparent, I think we need to examine where the government has decided to spend our money, because at the end of the day, that's our money. That's not Volkswagen's money, and it's not the government's money. Right? Yeah. So I think what's important to understand is the funding that's going to Volkswagen. First of all, we need to know how much is going to them, because they've already told us what they expect to bring back. And what we're told in terms of what Volkswagen is bringing back is they're going to offer, and this is, again, I'm just quoting this from articles that I've read, 3,000 jobs in Ontario and revenue of over $30 billion in 10 years, in 1 decade. Okay, so let's think about that. 3,000 jobs over 10 years and $30 billion in revenue. Those are good numbers. However, food and beverage. Do you know how many jobs food and beverage brings to Ontario? 466,200 jobs every year.
Versus how many?
3,000. Okay. You know how many spin-off jobs there are? There's another 107,200 jobs that are spin-off, delivery people, all that kind of stuff. That's over 570,000 people employed in the food and beverage industry. A recent survey showed that over 54% of Ontario residents have confirmed that their first job was in food and beverage, right? In terms of revenue, how does $33 billion a year sound? Not 30 billion over 10 years, 33 billion a year. That's how much the food and beverage industry brings into Ontario every year. So if you're going to look at what's important, food and beverage is important too. And yet we don't get anything like this. Now, what I think is also important and very important to note is Volkswagen is a foreign-owned company. They're from Germany, right? So they'll open up the factory here, but their ownership is German.
That's that one guy questioning that.
Right. So their profits are going back to Germany. They're not spending the money here. These restaurants, these are mom and pop operations. These are people like Brandon, people like Scott, who put their money, mortgage their houses to open up a restaurant.
Sold my kids.
And then they pay a ton of taxes on that. And then the government takes our taxes and gives it to a foreign-owned company. How much money have you received in grants in your zero? Tony, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what do you think, when is the industry, the food and beverage industry, going to get the respect it deserves, given the GDP that it produces for Ontario and the revenues it produces and the ROI and the number of people it employs? Can you imagine if the restaurants and the hotels and the bars went broke, what would happen? How many people would be unemployed?
Also, the restaurant sector in today's climate is in a unique position because of the massive amount of jobs against a digitized type of world out there that has really productivity with significantly less employees, including the auto plants today versus, say, 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So a government, the question is here, is there one business or one food service company that is able to create a massive revenue output and contribute as one to the industry, to the economy? And there isn't. So I think the government needs to look at the restaurant sector as a whole. It needs to be, what we need in our industry is a sustainable model. And the reason we have so many restaurants, 60% of restaurants close, in 3-year time period, is that we need to change the model. Something that experts, including restaurant owners in North America we're talking about the pandemic, and we haven't done much on it. But the government's tools, taxation and regulations, are able to help us get there. And if we look at the taxation, beverage alcohol comes in. There's 17,000 licensees in Ontario that can support their bottom line much better than currently. And what we need is a catalyst to make that happen. We have a rigid price elasticity model. We cannot push prices up to mitigate any cost increases.
No, you can't. You're gonna lose your customers, right?
So we need taxation and regulations to be supported by government. That's how they can help us. Period. It's not like just giving us cash. If they just give us those tools, I know we can be a much more prosperous industry.
If they directed $17 billion to an industry that employs 10 times as many people as what Volkswagen's going to employ, and generates 10 times as much revenue, this industry, I think, would do so much better and be so much healthier. If they give us something simple like tax relief for employees that we hire. Why can't you reach a threshold to say, if you have 10 employees, we're going to give you X number of dollars in tax relief or tax breaks. If you go over that, we're going to give you so much for each employee. Like, encourage the food and beverage industry to hire more people, because the more people you hire, the more money they make, the more tax they pay, the more they'll go out and buy refrigerators. Just like you said, they'll buy TVs, right? Why can't we help Ontario? Why do we find it so important to ignore the Ontario taxpayer and support foreign business? Let me give you an example. Cannabis, it's a brand new industry. It's only been around for 3 years in Ontario. And this year, we're on track in the cannabis industry to employ 30,000 people and have revenues of $4 billion, which means, again, even the cannabis industry being so new and young in terms of an industry, it's going to generate more jobs, or it has generated more jobs, and certainly generating more revenue for the government in terms of tax dollars. We paid $168 million last year in excise tax alone, not even considering all the other taxes. And yet there's another industry that seems to get no subsidies for the government. And I'll tell you something really funny. I'm the president of the Retail Cannabis Council of Ontario. We represent 1,700 cannabis retail operators. I've reached out to our Minister of Finance 3 times to ask him and come and meet with us at our general meetings where we have our 1,700 members present. Each time we've received a no thanks from the Ministry of Finance, saying that the minister is preoccupied or he has a previous engagement or whatever. Finally, we reached out to him the last time and said, if the minister can't make it, how about sending a deputy minister or a staff member, someone, just to show that you understand and acknowledge that there's other industries in Ontario that are contributing and do need to speak to you. We haven't even had a reply to that yet, Tony. So is there a concern in Ontario that things aren't happening transparent, like our premier says? Yeah, I think there is. Would Ontarians feel better if these benefits and tax credits were being spent on Ontarians who actually pay the money, who pay the taxes? Yes. I think so. I don't think anybody's going to deny it. And is the food and beverage industry an industry that's essential to Ontario, to its markets, to its economy, to its GDP? No one's going to argue that.
More so than EV battery opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
To that point, why does government always treat the agricultural sector with tender love and care, yet we're part of that? And food service comes from the agriculture roots. It's always about agriculture incentives and rebates and anything to do with keeping it alive, yet food service is part of it. That also needs to be entertained in what we're talking about.
Absolutely. And you know, cutting the red tape for the industry, helping them, you know, programs like extended hours of operation, they're essential to some businesses' survival. The problem that I see in the industry is people are forced to raise their prices, but the fact that they're raising their prices, it's not going to their bottom line. So you as a consumer and me as a consumer, when I go to a restaurant and I see that the food portions have gotten smaller or that the prices have increased, my first thought is, wow, these restaurants are really raking it in. But that's not the reality, right, Brandon? Like, where are these additional costs going?
It's passed on to customers, but we don't take a dollar. Like, the problem with this is we're definitely not making a dollar more than we were before. We're
making $1 less.
We are, because we have less customers. There's like, I mean, look at it. It's almost, it's fucking expensive to go for dinner now. Like it used to be, 2-3 times a week was an average person to do that. It's a treat now. It's once every 2 weeks for an average person. We go to the keg. Used to be $100 for a nice dinner with about 2 glasses of wine. You're at $250. That's just that's regular ticket. That's not even fancy.
What's your blended rate for third-party delivery right now?
Over 40% of restaurants are not.
Hold on a second, 20.
Sorry.
Over 40% of restaurants are not making profit right now. Yeah. We feel we increased prices up, 7%. The grocery stores went up 9%.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good point. We can't raise our price. We can't pass it straight through. Otherwise, we won't have any.
No, you have no customers.
Yeah.
You can only charge so much for
the latest the liquor tax. Another stupid hit. Like right in the worst time we've ever had, they got to smack us with another.
No, it's insane, and that's the same story I'm hearing from all of our clients. It's like they're raising their prices because the cost of the food has gone up, the wages have gone up, rents have gone up, taxes, property taxes have gone up. Like your leases, everything. Everybody's making money except the restaurants.
Folks are still paying loans, personal bank loans.
Right, and that's a great question. So I was gonna. So one of the things I wanted to ask Tony of you and of Brandon is, if you could ask for anything from our Minister of Finance or from our government to help the industry survive and strive forward and be stronger and employ more people, what would it be? Would it be in tax breaks, or would it be maybe in some kind of other incentive? What would it be? Like, what's your ask, Tony?
In post-pandemic, because of the current situation we're in, which is really critical, probably more critical than during the pandemic, because during the pandemic, the industry had hope and you had support in wages as well as rent. They're no longer there. So I would say to take the HST and for a time period, the restaurant keeps it in order for them to get up on the ground. Many closures right now are happening. There's new buyers out there, but there are many closures. The traditional restaurateur, as we knew it, we're seeing them closing the doors, and it needs a stimulus, if I can use the word. It reminds me back to the auto industry of Chrysler's and the Lee Iacocca years. We need a stimulus to keep this industry going, and if the industry is able to keep the HST for a period of time, that's the lift that they need to survive. Okay, so Tony's saying a tax relief in the form of being able to keep the HST. Brandon, what are your thoughts?
That's a very good one. And I think that's probably what's playing into why they're going after people that are owing taxes. So that just looks like they're trying to shut down small restaurants and kind of clean that last little ceiling out. For me, if I could throw in a couple of things that would add a lot of value, payroll taxes would be a huge benefit. So kind of back to what we said for like hiring incentives.
Right.
And another big thing, Tony, I don't know if you're feeling this from a thing, but we were all given loans to get out of this mess that we were in. Like this wasn't just subsidies; they were loans. Hey, take this loan; it's free interest for a year. And at the time, you just took it. Survival, it's fight or flight. Right. And now everybody's sitting there and saying, "Okay, so we're making less money. Our sales have dropped, and now we have loans.
How do I pay this back?
How do I pay this fucking loan back?"
Yeah.
And all the subsidies, they just stopped one day. They just decided tomorrow we're done.
It's over.
It's a pandemic's over in terms of like competition.
Yeah. And Adam, since you're all over beverage alcohol in Canada deserves a better model. It's full of tariffs and fees and taxes. Close to 70% of a product, whether we buy it as consumers or licensees, is made up of taxes, and that needs attention. And because we're still operating on a model that was set up after Prohibition.
Well, it's not just that, but it's true. I mean, at the end of the day, what we're looking at is government bureaucracies, whether it's the LCBO or whether it's the Ontario Cannabis Store. They make money everywhere. the government makes more money on alcohol than any restaurant, bar, or nightclub. And the government makes more money on cannabis than anybody who produces cannabis or anybody who sells it, because they make money when they buy it, they make money when they sell it, they make money on the taxes, and then they make money when you sell it.
And they're not going to
Look at the landscape of food service. Look at the landscape of food service in Canada. We have every American brand in quick service being represented in Canada. We don't have any full service brands that have actually done well. And when they come here, they close for two reasons: taxation and beverage alcohol pricing.
Yeah, and labor, also labor, but you're absolutely right. Beverage alcohol pricing is big. And does the government need to have their finger in every pie? Do they need to make money at every level? Because it's getting to the point where there's no industry anymore that's safe from having the government hand in their pocket, you know? And to me, that's a big concern, because at times like this, we need to be looking for leaders who are prepared to cut taxes and cut red tape to help industry survive. Because eventually, if all we do is keep hiring more and more people to work for the government, right? And we keep paying more and more taxes for less and less services, there's going to be such a small amount of people actually making money to pay taxes, to pay all these salaries, right? Like, something's got to give, and it's getting worse and worse. And, you know, we're looking at, obviously we have a municipal election here in Toronto, and it's like, who do you support? The councillors who have been working with the city or working for the city all these years, who have a war on cars and a war on business and don't like anything. And the only thing they're concerned about is safe injection sites and opening up more, places for people to, how can I put it? Come back out of sort of like a halfway house, right? That's creating issues in the industry. Or do you support someone who supports business, who realizes that, hey, all social services are important. And yes, we have to look out for the underprivileged. Yes, we have to consider, the environment. But at the end of the day, the people who are paying for all these pet projects, for all these things the activists want, it's the businesses. All the money is coming from business. So at the end of the day, you can't keep biting the hand that's paying for everything that you do, including your salary.
Why not? Because they've been doing that for 20 years. Nothing's going to change.
It's getting scary.
It's just got to a level that's we're watching. Obviously, small business getting wiped out. The middle class is getting smoked right now. But it is the wealth has shifted, and it's getting worse and worse.
Yeah,
I love everything you just said. You nailed that.
Well, referring to the city of Toronto, I mean, property tax for business is disappropriately paid versus what the residents pay. But which mayor has the guts to change it when you're talking to the voters?
Yeah, that's the key.
How did rent go up the month after the last shutdown?
How did business insurance double when people didn't even need insurance?
Yeah,
it's absolutely insane, guys. We've gone way over our time. I apologize, Jay. Yeah, our producer, Jay, are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay, it was fantastic. I'm so sorry if we went over time again, but again, once we got rolling, it was like impossible to stop.
We need to book like an hour every.
Yeah, our next podcast will be 6 hours.
We could probably do that.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we're gonna have
to bitch about for 2 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna be back in 2 weeks. Thank you, first of all, to my guests, Brandon, Tony, and our co-host Scott. Great job, Jay, our producer. You did an amazing job. I hope we didn't. How can I put it? We didn't exercise you too far.
Is that how you legally say it?
Well, look, at the end of the day, we're extremely passionate about this industry. You've got you've got a bunch of people in the room that care about the industry and want to see it do well. And when we keep getting hit with things like this, when we continue to be disrespected by our government, and no one's helping us except ourselves, then it's a little bit hard. You can't help but get emotional about it. So. Thank you to my guests. Thank you to Scott, our co-host. Jay, thank you for all your help. And thank you to all the listeners for being here and supporting us. And we hope you've learned just a little bit more about the legal industry, the food and beverage industry. We'll be back in a couple more weeks with some more exciting guests and some more interesting topics. Have a great day and have a great night. Great.